Bronya, she's my most used buffer. She's very heavily invested into. I pretty much use her with any team that I can, whether that be my Sealy, even though she doesn't really need it, whether that be my Jingliu. I use Bronya a lot. She's S3, her traces are pretty decently invested into, not as heavily as my Fu Xuan and other characters like her, but still nonetheless she's invested into. She has a decent relic set and she's E0. But despite how much I use her, I've never made a guide on her, and I feel like since a lot of individuals did reroll for her or are consistently hoping for her, or maybe you're at that point where you can pick up the standard banner character after you've done 300 pulls on the standard banner and you want her. So I suppose it's time to change that. Let's talk. As I mentioned before, my Bronya is running with my Jingliu and other characters like her. I'm not using fast Bronya, so she doesn't have a bunch of speed inherently built onto her. She's at 129. She acts at the same time, if not right after my Pegla, but after my DPS and before the next turn. So she's good overall. For overall stat distribution, the primary ones you want to pay attention to are the crit damage here and the 133 energy regeneration rate. Everything else is just okay. For her relic set, she's using a 2-piece messenger, broken keel, and guard set. Now, previously, and I want to clarify this, I did use a 4-piece messenger set, but the primary difficulty with this set is that the 12% speed bonus here, doesn't necessarily say it, applies to your overall base speed. If you're looking at my characters right now, 135 speed, 129, 129, and 110 speed. Just based on an observation, if you were reading the set bonus, my Jingliu should get the most speed and have the highest speed overall as a result of that 12% speed buff, because she has the highest speed as of right now. The problem is, it is based on your base speed. My Jingliu has 96 speed, my Bronya has 99 speed, Pela has 105, and Fu Xuan has 100. Basically what this means is that Pela is going to benefit the most, followed by Fu Xuan, followed by Bronya, and then Jingliu least. That 12% speed buff can in a lot of ways desynchronize your current team, because even if you're having your Bronya right after your main DPS, if another character has a higher base speed, they can be pushed up further as a result of that 12% speed buff. And so what this means is that I've essentially built out all of my supports without the 4-piece of the messenger set. My healers are built up with 2-piece sets and 2-piece combinations. The only character who's still running the 4-piece set is Ting Yun, because my Ting Yun doesn't necessarily rely on the action order to do her job. So I want to clarify that. If you're running or considering running the 4-piece set, I would actually recommend, at least if you speed tune your Bronya to act after your main damage healer, to go for a 2-piece set bonus, and then go for something like the guard set for the reduced damage taken, which increases your survivability, or you can skip all of that and go for Musketeers. Musketeers' 12% attack is a nice, small, but nice damage increase, and then a 6% speed is the equivalent to the 2-piece of the messenger set alongside the basic attack damage increase. As of right now, Musketeers is still a great set, and even though 12% speed is a lot, if it messes up your action order or your current rotation, I don't recommend it, because you can get speed in other areas. And even if we're considering Bronya as an example, she has action forward in her kit at base. So you don't really need more speed. Now, with all that being said, for Trace priority, since we're on the topic, her ultimate is the highest priority, followed by her skill. This action forward, or advanced forward, whichever one you want to call it, is nice, but the problem with this is it can desynchronize your current rotation, and it can end up with your Bronya acting right before your damage healer, which is the exact opposite of what you want. So for me personally, because my DPSs are so invested, at least in terms of Eidolons and stuff, I always have my Bronya act right after my main DPS and then use skill consistently. The enemy doesn't survive long enough for that to happen again and again, even in multi-wave content. But I understand that's not a situation that applies to all of you. So let's talk overall what you have access to and what are your options. First off, Battle Isn't Over is the best light cone, just in general. I always recommend this. Even though I've superimpositioned mine, I only did that because I had so many other light cones leveled for my supports that I didn't see a point in raising another one just for the additional energy regen rate and the slight damage bonus that isn't really useful. So instead, if you have it at superimposition 1 and you have multiple copies, you can level them up unless you have really good alternative options for your other supports. But this is your primary option. Second, I can recommend Past and Future. It is like a discount version of Bronya's. The downside of Past and Future is it doesn't have the energy regen rate that you see here. It also doesn't have the energy regeneration on attacks like the Memories of the Past, Meshing Cogs, etc. So do keep in mind that you're getting a damage bonus of 16% up to a maximum of I think 40 or so. but you are losing out on energy regen, and that can lengthen your rotations. Carthrone Weave the Clouds is, in my honest opinion, one of the best generalist Lycones. I can actually recommend going for this if you have the battle pass. It's a pretty decent one overall. Dance Dance Dance, great. Slap it on anyone and you'll do fine. The action forward is the equivalent to her basic attack shot, so it is kind of a point to where you're only using this for the benefit it provides your allies, not necessarily Bronya herself, but it's still a decent one nonetheless. Planetary Rendezvous. This is only good at the moment if you're using Blade or Dan Hang. If you are not, the additional damage bonus isn't helping anyone else out. And then for 3 stars, at S5, Memory of the Past will be better than Meshing Cogs just because it's a base stat, but it's still decent enough nonetheless. And then Chorus, it's an attack increase. It's nice, but it's an attack increase and you don't really need that much attack because you're doing so many other buffs with Bronya herself. I don't recommend it. But Battle Isn't Over is her best option. Eidolon wise, E4. Every one of these is great, don't get me wrong, but E4 allows you to shorten your rotations because if she's doing more follow-up attacks, you're generating more energy. So keep that in mind. If you have E4, you're golden. But what about Relics? I mentioned this, the messenger said, if you want to go for it, cool, you have alternative options. The 4-piece as Musketeers is nice, the speed is great. The guard set for the 2-piece and even the 4-piece is nice for the energy regeneration that it provides you, at least here with the 5 at the 4-piece set, but the reducing damage taken is exceptional. You could alternatively swap that out for something like the Longevous set for the additional HP, or even just the defensive set. Both work. Everything else is meh. You're not going to be breaking with Bronya. Her main job is to buff, not break. The Wind set is action forward 25%. That sounds nice until you realize that Bronya herself just does that. So anything with action forward, at least if it's a self buff, isn't too useful on Bronya in my opinion. I would instead prioritize something like reducing your damage taken or just increasing your buffing capabilities. That's pretty much it. We may get more sets in the future. And for the additional 2-piece at the end for the planetary sphere and stuff like that, I recommend the Broken Keel just because the effect resistance stops her from being debuffed, which is great since she can clear other people's debuff if she's not debuffed. And you have other options here. Sprightly Von Whack is a set I can only recommend if you have something like E4 maybe, or a bunch of superpositions on the Battle Isn't Over, just because the energy regen is nice, but the additional 40% action forward isn't what you want. You don't want her acting before your DPS. The Celestial Differentiator gives you 16% crit damage, which sounds nice until you realize that she's not necessarily buffing as a result of all that 16%. She's buffing as a result of 15 to 16% of that total 16%, which isn't a lot. That's like maybe 1 or 2 or 1 point something crit damage. It's not a lot. I'd prioritize, if you're looking for overall stats to prioritize on your relics, crit damage is a nice. Effect resistance and defense are great too. Speed, if you can find it. If you don't know, the more speed your Bronya has, the harder it's going to be for her to act after your DPS, so keep that in mind. But at the same time, you don't want her using too many skill points because it can mess up your rotation if she has to basic attack. So I would prioritize slow Bronya for consistency. Now, for teams and example teams, she can work anywhere, but these are the ones I found. For Jingliu, it is Jingliu, Bronya, Pela, and then Fushuan. She does not work super well with Yan Qing just because, in my opinion, using so many skill points between these characters, he always wants to use his skill. If you have Bronya, she wants to use her skill. If you have Pela, it could work. She will do auto attacks or normal attacks, but then you have Japard, who may need to use his skill just to get his ult up again. It's kind of iffy. For Sealy, she has better options right now. And the more non-quantum characters you add, the more you're messing up Silverwolf, so I would prioritize instead just using Lynx for mono quantum. It's not the best, but it's decent enough. Blade obviously works wonderfully with Bronya, especially if you're using Planetary Rendezvous. Baiba Lunai benefits more from Yukong. And Xingyun can help as well if you have E2. I don't recommend Bronya at the moment because he already buffs his own crit damage so much with his traces. If I'm looking into his traces, if I'm looking into this one, 24% crit damage here, and I'm looking into the stacks, you get additional crit damage here. So I don't recommend Bronya. You may oversaturate the crit stat, and even though you do that with Yukong, you also get crit rates, so it's a bit of a trade-off there. But that's it for Bronya. If you enjoyed this guide, found it helpful, informative in any way, shape, or form, hey, leave a like down below, subscribe, or maybe join the server, and I'll see you next time. The next guide will be on Bailu.